The sun had already begun its cruel climb, beating down on the asphalt until it shimmered like a black mirror. Heat waves twisted the air above the parking lot, making the cars sweat and sigh in the noon silence. Inside one of those steel cages, a German shepherd puppy pressed its small body against the glass, its sides hiving, tongue lolling uselessly against the scorching floor. Its eyes were pools of fear, pleading, searching, whispering in the only language it knew: survival. Every bark was hoarse, every whine a soft echo swallowed by the roar of the sun. From the corner of the lot, an old man leaned on his cane, watching. The lines of his face were etched with decades of quiet observation, patience, and invisible scars. He paused, squinting through the heat haze, and something inside him tightened, the kind of ache you recognize only when someone else's life hangs by a thread. Sweat dripped down his brow as he shuffled closer, each step deliberate, and in that long, unbearable moment, time seemed to fold over itself. The world shrank to the glass, the pause, the eyes, and the faint, desperate heartbeat of a life begging to be saved. The sun was already high, slicing through the sky like a blade, each ray scorching the asphalt until it shimmered and quivered. The parking lot, normally a place of mundane noise and movement, had become an oven, silent except for the faint hum of heat rising from the metal cars. Inside one of those vehicles, a small German shepherd puppy lay pressed against the glass, its tiny body trembling. The floor beneath it radiated heat, unbearable to bear. Paused, yet the puppy couldn't move. Its tongue lolled uselessly, hot and dry, as it panted with a rhythm that seemed too shallow for its frantic heartbeat. Eyes wide and glistening, it scanned the car for escape, whimpering low, almost inaudible, but its voice was a fragile thread of life stretched thin by the merciless sun. Each bark that escaped was short, hoarse, a desperate plea that vanished into the heavy, oppressive air. Outside, the world moved in slow, careless oblivion. People passed by without a glance, unaware or unwilling to intervene, their movements sharp and quick against the blurry, wavering air above the asphalt. The puppy's ears flicked at every sound, the distant rumble of tires, the faint rustle of a plastic bag. But none brought hope, only heightened fear. Its legs tucked under its body, small claws scraping uselessly against the floor, its tail tucked low. Panic rose in waves, and with each wave, its cries grew weaker, the heat sucking the strength from its tiny body. There was no shadow of relief, no promise of water or shade. Only the relentless blaze outside and the suffocating metal enclosing it like a trap with invisible teeth. And then, through the heat haze, the puppy noticed a figure. An old man moving slowly, cane tapping the asphalt in deliberate rhythm, his gaze fixed on the car. His face was lined, etched deeply by decades. But there was something in his eyes, a quiet recognition of suffering, a weight of empathy that caused him to pause mid-step. The puppy tilted its head, ears trembling, as if it sensed the presence before it could even understand it. There was no reason for trust yet, only instinct, but instinct whispered, maybe this one might care. Maybe this one could save me. The man drew closer, each step measured against the heat radiating off the asphalt. Sweat streaked his face, dripping from the temples, stinging his eyes, but he did not falter. He squinted against the sun, shoulders hunched, hand brushing against the worn wood of his cane for reassurance. The puppy's tiny body quivered, muscles tensing for flight that was impossible. Panic pulsed through its chest, a chaotic rhythm that threatened to override any shred of reason. Yet amidst the fear there was a sliver of hope. That maybe, just maybe, salvation had finally arrived. The puppy's whines grew louder, harsher, breaking the silence of the lot like a fragile alarm bell. Its small paws pressed harder against the floor, claws sliding uselessly. As its eyes tracked every movement of the man outside, he stopped in front of the car, hands gripping his cane, and for a long moment, the world held its breath. The heat seemed to intensify, the air heavy with the scent of burnt rubber, hot metal, and something faintly sweet, maybe the faint smell of fear or life itself. The puppy pressed its nose against the glass, panting so heavily that each breath came like a shuddering gasp, trying desperately to make contact, to plead in the only way it knew. It whimpered again, small, trembling, but there was an urgency now, a silent insistence that this moment, this encounter, could change everything. The old man's shadow fell over the car, and the puppy flinched, uncertain whether it heralded safety or danger. But then, slowly, he knelt, his eyes meeting the small, pleading gaze pressed against the glass. There was no sudden action, no hurried rush, only patience, understanding, and a stillness that promised he would not harm it. The puppy hesitated, paw lifted, trembling in mid-air. unsure if it could trust this human. Inside, its tiny heart raced, each beat echoing against the confines of the hot metal prison. The old man's gaze softened, a faint, comforting smile brushing the corners of his lips, and in that moment the world contracted. For the puppy, it was no longer alone. The inferno around it still roared, but here was a presence, steady, patient, and willing to fight for life. The heat pressed harder, the glass radiated like fire, and the puppy's energy waned. But it could not pull away. A quiet determination, fragile yet unyielding, grew in its chest. Survival demanded focus, and instinct whispered to reach out to trust. The man's hand moved slowly, resting on the roof of the car, shadowing the glass, offering calm without sound. The puppy whimpered, a delicate, trembling sound, and pressed its small nose closer. Each shiver ran through its body, each breath rattled against the scorching metal, but the sliver of hope, the promise of rescue, was enough to keep it alive. In that suspended moment, time seemed to stretch, the sun paused its burning, and the lot itself fell into silence, waiting for the story of survival to begin. The old man's hand rested lightly on the car roof, and the puppy's body froze, muscles coiled like a spring ready to snap. The heat pressed against its fur, heavy and suffocating, and each panting breath felt like inhaling fire. Its eyes, wide and shimmering with fear, tracked the old man's slow movements, unsure if this was salvation or another threat. The air shimmered, thick with heat, and each footstep he took against the asphalt echoed like a drumbeat in the puppy's chest. Panic rose and fell, a tide that lapped at the edges of reason, making every small sound, distant car horns, the faint rustle of a leaf, seem amplified, dangerous, urgent. But beneath the panic, something more delicate stirred, a fragile thread of trust, so thin it could be snapped with one wrong move, yet unbroken so far. The old man's fingers gripped the cane tighter, knuckles pale, sweat dripping down the bridge of his nose. He scanned the lot briefly, ensuring he had space, then crouched, bringing his body lower, less imposing. The puppy's ears twitched, small muscles trembling beneath soft fur, every instinct screaming to flee. But it could not move, the metal floor sapped strength from its tiny legs, and the heat had turned fear into a lethargy that weighed on every muscle. The old man spoke softly, almost a whisper, though he did not expect the puppy to understand words. The tone was enough, calm, deliberate, patient. It was a language older than speech, one the puppy recognized in some instinctive chord. A bead of sweat slid from the man's temple, falling onto the asphalt with a quiet hiss. The puppy flinched at the tiny sound, heart hammering, and pressed its tiny body further against the glass. Heat waves shimmered off the car like a mirage, bending the light, making the world outside seem distant, unreal. It was trapped, yes, but trapped in a world real, each detail magnified, the oppressive scent of metal, the faint acrid smell of burned rubber, the unbearable warmth pressing from every side. It lifted a paw hesitantly, claws scraping lightly against the floor, a silent plea that the man might understand. And somehow, he did. The old man circled the car slowly, his cane tapping in steady rhythm, each step a reassurance, a signal of intention. The puppy's eyes followed him, unwavering now. Heart still racing but curiosity threading through the panic. He knelt again, closer to the driver's side window, and tapped gently on the glass. The sound reverberated faintly inside, startling at first, but it carried no threat. The puppy flinched, ears back, then tilted its head, studying the old man's face. The wrinkles around his eyes softened as he offered a small, steady smile, and the puppy's trembling slowed slightly, just enough to let the pulse of hope seep in. For a long moment, time seemed to stretch, as if the sun itself hesitated. The puppy's breathing was rapid, shallow, but there was a glimmer in its eyes, a spark that flickered, fragile but stubborn. The old man's hand rested once more on the metal, warmth from his skin muted by the sun-baked roof. He tried the door handle, finding it locked unyielding. Frustration tugged at his chest, but he did not give up. Every second that passed was a trial by fire for the puppy, each breath burning, each pant a reminder of its fragility. The old man's focus sharpened, mind racing through possible ways to release the tiny life inside. He looked around, gouging the environment. There was a shadowed corner in the lot where the sun didn't press as hard, a brief relief from the inferno. He would have to move the car, but the thought of shifting it with the puppy inside made his stomach tighten. The pup whined again, a soft, desperate sound, and it was enough to break the old man's hesitation. He muttered under his breath, words meant only for himself, recalling mistakes and regrets from years past, lives he hadn't been able to save, opportunities missed. But this time, he promised silently, this would be different. Every memory of failure fueled his resolve, every pang of guilt a motivator. He would not let this little life be another one lost. The puppy pressed its nose against the glass, trembling, yet there was a small recognition in its eyes now. Hope, delicate and cautious, began to thread through the fear. Each shiver of its tiny body was mirrored by the old man's careful movements, a silent dance between instinct and intention. The sun blazed on relentless, but there was a rhythm emerging, a quiet communication that transcended language. I see you. I am here. You will not be left alone. The puppy tilted its head, paw trembling in midair, and for the first time allowed itself a breath that was not entirely panic. The fire around it had not abated, but the storm inside had found a small anchor, a presence willing to fight alongside it. Minutes passed like hours. Each second was a crucible for the small German shepherd, body pressed against the burning metal, mind swimming between terror and trust. And still, the old man persisted, slow, deliberate, unyielding. The puppy's eyes followed every subtle motion, noting the softness in his gestures, the patience in his gaze, the calm behind every deliberate action. Heat beat down. Muscles weakened, heart raced, but amidst the inferno, a fragile promise of life flickered. There was someone who would not walk away. And that thought, however small, began to steady the trembling, fragile heartbeat of a soul too young, too frightened, yet too determined to give up. The rescue was not yet complete, but the first step, the step of hope, had been taken. The old man's hands hovered over the handle, hesitating only for a fraction of a second, but it felt like an eternity to the puppy. Heat pressed relentlessly against its small body, pressing its paws to the floor like they were melting into the metal beneath. Its tongue lolled weakly, breaths coming in short, desperate pants, eyes glimmering with both fear and faint curiosity. The faint scent of sweat, metal, and asphalt wafted through the slightly cracked window, mixing with the puppy's own fear, and yet it could sense something different now. A calm presence, deliberate and patient, not rushing, not forcing, just waiting. The old man's gaze met the puppy's, steady, unwavering, and for a fragile heartbeat, the world seemed to slow. The pounding heat, the relentless sun, and the trembling paws softened against a single truth: someone was here to help. Finally, the handle clicked. The lock gave way with a subtle metallic sigh, and the puppy flinched at the sudden noise, ears flattening. Its heart raced, tiny chest heaving, but there was no time to retreat. The old man opened the door slowly, leaning back just enough so as not to startle the small creature. Sunlight and heat poured into the interior, but so did a faint breeze from the open doorway, carrying a hint of relief. The puppy's eyes darted around, wary, unsure if this new movement was escape or danger. Its tail twitched nervously, tucked low, quivering, yet something inside it urged it forward, a faint instinct to reach for safety. The old man extended his hand, weathered and worn from decades of labor and life, calloused fingers trembling slightly from both age and urgency. He didn't rush, didn't try to snatch. He simply let his hand rest near the puppy, palm open, steady. The tiny creature pressed its nose against his skin through the heat of the metal, inhaling a scent both foreign and safe. A soft whine escaped, almost a whisper of acknowledgement, and the old man mirrored it, murmuring gently, low tones that carried no threat. Every breath they shared in that small, scorching space became a bridge between terror and trust, frail yet unbreakable. With a trembling paw, the puppy lifted and pressed it against the old man's hand, claws barely touching, hesitant yet deliberate. Its body shivered violently, every muscle taut, but there was a sense of surrender in the gesture, a tiny act of faith in a world that had offered only fear until now. The old man's fingers curled lightly, enclosing the paw with care, careful not to crush the fragile trust forming. Sweat dripped from both bodies, the old man's brow and the puppy's warm fur. But in that mingled heat, a bond took root, delicate yet profound. The first step outside the car was tentative. The puppy's paws touched the asphalt cautiously, hot and abrasive beneath its soft pads. Its tail stayed tucked, ears low, but it kept pace with the old man's careful, guiding movements. Each step was a negotiation, a silent communication of patience, reassurance, and shared vulnerability. The puppy stumbled once, a small yelp escaping, and the old man stopped immediately, lowering himself to the heat-warped ground, offering both support and a shield from the relentless sun. Trust deepened with each small gesture, unspoken, profound, and essential. The parking lot seemed to expand, yet shrink at the same time. Every sound, the distant hum of traffic, the faint rustle of leaves, was magnified, and every smell carried meaning: the bitterness of asphalt, the faint sweetness of the puppy's fur, the old man's earthy scent. Shadows shifted under the cars, offering brief pockets of relief, and the puppy navigated them with a mixture of instinct and cautious curiosity, slowly realizing that the outside world could contain safety as well as danger. Its panting began to ease, still rapid but less frantic, and with every step, its small chest rose and fell with growing confidence. They reached the edge of the lot, where a faint breeze cooled the sun-scorched air. The old man paused, kneeling to meet the puppy at eye level. Their gazes locked again, pup and human, both trembling from heat and fear, yet connected in an unspoken understanding. The puppy's tail flicked slightly, a tiny spark of hope blossoming. It sniffed the old man's hand again, tentative, exploratory, before brushing its tiny body against him in the smallest gesture of gratitude, trust, and relief. The bond had been formed in fire and fear, but it was real, strong, and undeniable. For the first time in hours, the puppy felt relief ripple through its tiny body. Chest rising with easier breaths, paws lighter beneath it, heart still racing but steadier. It had survived the inferno of the car, but more importantly, it had found an ally, protector, a guide, a friend. The first touch had bridged the gap between desperation and hope, fear and trust, and in that scorching, oppressive heat, under the relentless sun, a small life whispered its first true promise: maybe, just maybe, it would live. The old man carried the puppy carefully, its small body trembling against his chest as if every fiber of its being still expected disaster. The sun had lost some of its midday fury, but the asphalt still radiated heat, waves of it curling upward in visible mirages. The puppy's ears flicked nervously, eyes wide, watching the shadows of cars and trees passing over the pavement. Its little paws occasionally scrabbled against the old man's shirt, searching for grip, for reassurance, for something solid in a world that had offered only fear. Its tongue lolled weakly, breaths shallow, but the rhythm had slowed. Panic was no longer the only pulse it knew. They arrived at a quiet backyard, a small patch of grass surrounded by wooden fences that smelled faintly of earth and old sun-warmed wood. The old man knelt gently, setting the puppy down on the soft blades. For a moment, the little German shepherd froze, unsure of this strange, open world. Its paws sank slightly into the cool grass, a texture unfamiliar yet comforting. The sun still filtered in through the branches overhead, dappling the ground in shifting patterns that flickered across its fur. The old man crouched beside it, soft eyes meeting the puppy's, radiating patience and safety. No words were necessary. His presence alone was a balm to the raw nerves and aching body pressed against his chest just minutes before. The puppy lowered itself to the grass, chest heaving, trembling less with each breath. It sniffed cautiously at the ground, each inhale filling its small lungs with the scent of grass, soil, and something faintly sweet: freedom. Its tail remained low but quivered lightly as a tentative curiosity began to bloom. The old man watched quietly, offering water in a shallow dish, waiting for the puppy to approach. At first it hesitated, hovering, paw lifted mid-step, then lowered again as fear tugged it backward. But thirst, sharp and real, pushed it forward. Tentatively it lapped at the water, tiny tongue splashing, eyes flicking up at the old man. A soft murmur escaped his lips, not quite words, not quite song, just the gentle sound of reassurance that they were safe now. Time unfolded slowly, each moment a fragile negotiation between trauma and trust. The puppy explored the yard in short, cautious bounds, nose to the earth, ears flicking at rustling leaves, distant bird calls, and the faint hum of life beyond the fence. Its small body still shivered occasionally, muscles tense, but curiosity gained ground over fear. The old man followed, crouched low, his cane resting nearby, hand extended in case the puppy needed support. They moved together through this new, shaded world, each step building the fragile scaffolding of confidence that had been stripped away in the car. Shadows shifted with the setting sun, painting the yard in softer tones. The puppy paused beneath a small tree, tongue lolling, chest rising steadily. It shook itself once, body quivering, scattering tiny bits of dust and grass, and in that moment, it seemed to breathe more fully than it had in hours. Its eyes met the old man's again, and the connection was unmistakable. A recognition of protection, of patience, of shared struggle. There was no rush, no pressure, just the slow, careful rhythm of two beings learning to exist in safety together. Night approached, casting long, gentle shadows, and the puppy curled into a small ball on the grass, head resting lightly against the old man's shoe. Its breathing was steady now, the tremors of fear fading into faint shivers. The world beyond the fence was no longer a source of immediate terror, but a canvas of gentle sounds and smells, each whisper of life encouraging growth and courage. The old man's hand rested lightly on its back, a silent promise that this new life was protected, nurtured, and seen. In the quiet that settled over the backyard, the puppy's first true moment of calm came not with grand gestures but with the slow, deliberate patience of someone willing to stay, willing to watch, willing to wait. Its little paws dug gently into the soft earth, tail flicking once in cautious contentment, ears relaxed, eyes softening. Trauma had not disappeared, but the first shadow of healing had fallen, subtle yet profound, washing over the puppy like the first cool breeze after a relentless day of heat. In this soft, amber glow of evening, the puppy learned that it could trust, could rest, could begin to live again. The first rays of morning filtered through the trees, painting the backyard in gentle streaks of gold. The puppy stirred, small paws stretching into the soft grass, ears flicking with alert curiosity. Its eyes, once wide with fear and desperation, now shimmered with a cautious confidence, glinting in the early light like tiny mirrors reflecting hope. The old man sat nearby, leaning on his cane, watching quietly. He didn't speak. Words weren't needed. The puppy sniffed the air, tentative at first, then began exploring, tail flicking slightly, each step lighter, freer, more deliberate than the last. The shadows of the past, of the scorching car and endless heat, lingered faintly, but they no longer defined the puppy's world. It paused mid-step, ears twitching, and glanced back at the old man. In that small, measured gaze was a silent question, "Am I safe?" And in the old man's eyes, a quiet promise answered always. Encouraged, the puppy bounded forward, clumsy at first, paws skimming the grass with joyful uncertainty. Each stumble ended with a soft shake, ears flopping, tail wagging slowly, and then faster, until the fear that had once gripped every muscle had loosened enough to allow wonder to bloom. He offered a gentle hand, palm low, and the puppy nudged it with its nose, tentative at first, then pressing closer, brushing fur against calloused skin in a small gesture of gratitude. Time passed in gentle rhythms. The puppy discovered every corner of the yard, small scents, shadows, hidden patches of warmth and cool earth. It chased the fleeting shadows of leaves, paws skittering across the grass, and for the first time it felt movement not as a frantic necessity but as a celebration of life. Each small action, the tilt of its head, the flick of a paw, the tentative wag of its tail, was a statement: "I am here. I am alive. I belong." The old man followed, steady and calmed, a quiet anchor amidst the newfound freedom, his presence a reminder that survival was no longer only about endurance but about trust, growth, and connection. The puppy paused near a shaded tree and looked up, ears pricked, nostrils flaring. A faint breeze carried the sense of the world beyond the fence, distant flowers, fresh soil, and something faintly sweet it had not smelled in days, perhaps ever. It took a deep breath, small chest rising with newfound strength, and stepped forward, paws firm, tail lifted. Every instinct that had once screamed only fear now whispered curiosity, excitement, and hope. The old man smiled softly, voice low and steady, a gentle murmur that blended with the morning light. The puppy's ears flicked, tail wagged faster, and in that delicate, fragile connection, the full weight of their journey together became clear. Both had been saved in a way neither could have predicted. Hours passed like this, in slow, deliberate exploration, quiet play, and cautious bonding. The puppy learned to trust touch again, to accept affection without trembling, to breathe without panic, to chase without fear. Its once shaken body had grown stronger, the coat glossy in patches of sunlight, muscles stretching with purpose. Each interaction with the old man reinforced the lessons of patience, safety, and love. The small, cautious nudges became full-bodied presses, head against hand, body leaning into warmth and reassurance. Life was no longer a fragile whisper but a quiet, confident statement, each heartbeat stronger than the last. As the sun climbed higher, the old man knelt in the grass, eyes meeting the puppy's. In that gaze so many words were shared without sound: survival, gratitude, forgiveness, and promise. The puppy pressed its tiny body against him, paws splayed, head tucked under his chin in a delicate embrace that carried a lifetime of emotion. The heat of yesterday, the terror, and the panic had faded into memory, replaced by trust, connection, and the gentle rhythm of shared life. Its eyes closed briefly, a sigh escaping its tiny body, and the old man's hand rested lightly on its back, a grounding touch that spoke louder than words. The puppy lifted its head again, eyes shining with a quiet joy, tail wagging fully now, and barked once, A small, clear, confident sound. Not a plea, not a cry of desperation, but a celebration. I am alive. I am safe. I am loved. And as the morning stretched over the yard, golden light settling over soft grass and warm earth, the old man and the puppy sat side by side, hearts steady, breaths deep, a silent understanding passing between them. Life had whispered back, and both had answered. The shadow of fear was gone, replaced by the warmth of survival, trust, and the tender, enduring bond that only those who save and are saved can ever truly know.